Hey there supporters, welcome to another episode of Best Support. In this series we look at the potential of each support and rate them on a scale from 1 to 5. This time featuring Morgana, the Fallen Angel.
Feel my pain. Oh!
Now that's just kinky. So Morgana, Tracy Morgana? Morgana is a hybrid support. Hybrid in the sense that she could be played as a mid lane mage or a support. When playing Morgana in the mid lane, you have wave clear for days and sustain to keep going for a long time. When playing support Morgana, you are neither aggressive nor passive. You do have a presence in lane, which is focused around keeping your ADC safe while poking and controlling the enemy team. Your damage is decent, but as a support you should be focused more on keeping your teammates alive. She's a squishy support, but she has good initiation if you can hit the enemy with your Q. But unlike other champions, she isn't tanky enough to be the frontline of every fight. She's a good pick when against more aggressive supports, as you can negate many of their initiations. Let's have a look at her abilities. Morgana's passive is called Soul Siphon. At level 1 you permanently gain 10% spell vamp, increasing up to 20% with level. This passive is usually what makes Morgana so great as a mid laner, because you can heal quite a bit. As a support it still does some healing but not a large amount. Her Q is called Dark Binding. When activated, Morgana releases a sphere of dark magic that travels in a line, dealing magic damage to the first enemy hit and rooting them. At level 1 you root the enemy for 2 seconds and up to 3 seconds at level 5. Dark Binding has a long travel time, so try and anticipate your enemy's movements. This ability is pretty much her bread and butter when playing support. If you don't hit your binding, she isn't going to be that useful in the game. Due to the long travel time, it's easier to use this ability to stop enemies from engaging, but it can and still should be used for engaging. Just remember that it's a snare and not a stun. Her W is Tormented Soil. Morgana infests the target area for 5 seconds. Enemies standing there will take damage every half second. The damage is increased based on the percentage of your enemy's missing health. In lane you can use this spell for getting easy gold with your Spell Thief's Edge and of course any of the upgrades. Every time your opponent takes damage you will be awarded the gold from your support item. Hitting an enemy with Dark Binding and using Tormented Soil does some damage. As an AP mid laner the damage is just ridiculous. Her E is Black Shield. Morgana shields an ally or herself for up to 5 seconds, absorbing magical damage. While the shield holds, the person with the shield is immune to all crowd control effects. At level 1 the shield absorbs 70 magical damage up to 350 at level 5. This spell makes it very annoying to lane against you. You can pretty much negate all of the enemy's crowd control, which ruins pretty much most initiations. Be warned that some spells will still work even though you aren't crowd controlled. For example, Thresh's hook still lands, you won't be crowd controlled but he can still pull himself towards you. Practice using your shield as late as possible, don't use it early, your enemies might just switch targets. Her R is Soul Shackles. When activated, Morgana latches chains to any nearby enemy within range, dealing damage. Enemies hit are slowed by 20%. If your enemies don't get out of range after 3 seconds, they are stunned for 1.5 seconds and receive the same damage as they did initially. As you are somewhat squishy, don't just run in and use your ultimate. The enemy might be able to kill you before the stun occurs. With names on her abilities like Dark Binding and Soul Shackles, I'm sensing that someone might have been hitting the SM clubs a bit hard when designing her. Ew! For masteries I'd recommend going 6-18-6 with points in Meditation, Intelligence and Thunderlord's Decree along the way. However, the damage from Thunderlord's Decree at lower levels is great for trades and you really don't have any other viable options for Keystone masteries. You could go 0-18-12 and get Insight for reduced cooldown on summoner spells. So basically we want 45% cooldown reduction. We want to be able to get as many snares off as possible and lower the cooldown on our ultimate. But seeing as we aren't going to be doing a lot of damage, Exposed Weakness will help out your team a lot. For runes I like to go with Hybrid Penetration Marks, Armor Seals, Magic Resist Glyphs and Ability Power Quintessence. I tend to run with these to be as useful as I can in the first levels. As I said, Morgana doesn't do a lot of damage, so I try to boost this with my runes. For item builds you can do pretty much what you want, it really comes down to what you want to achieve when playing Morgana, but I'd recommend a very defensive build. An example could be Eye of the Watchers as your support item. It's a Ruby Sidestone and Frost Queen's Claim packed into one. The trade-off is that you won't have spooky ghosts and it only rewards half the ability power. For a more offensive build you should pick Frost Queen's Claim or if you're crushing the early game. For boots I recommend Boots of Swiftness. As you are what I call a hybrid support you won't have much use for Boots of Mobility. Picking Boots of Swiftness gives you more movement speed while reducing slowing effects by 25%. I like to roam, so increased movement speed is always great. Zeke's Harbinger is a fun item in the way that it gives you a lot of stats you can use, and the passive is interesting. Basically, when you're near your marked teammate and either you attack, you generate stacks. At 100 stacks, you both get 20% increased ability power and 50% critical strike chance. 50% increased critical strike chance is great for your ADC, and you'll benefit from the extra ability power. Frozen Heart gives you tanky stats. It's great in the sense that every ADC you're against deals some sort of physical damage, and reducing their attack speed by 15% can help you in so many battles. The 20% cooldown reduction is probably what I like the most. Building a Sonya's Hourglass seems a bit counterintuitive when I've told you that we aren't going to be building damage, but the reason we build it is mostly due to the active. Getting into a teamfight, you'll be able to use your ultimate and use the active on Sonya's Hourglass, and the only thing the enemy team can do is flee or get stunned. For my last item, I usually tend to go for Liandry's Torment. It's not really a defensive item, but it does give you health and a passive that burns away the enemy's health over time. When I play Morgana, I don't see many games last this long. I've probably only had a handful of games. As always, remember to never build the same items for every game. You should look at what you're against and build according. For spells, I always start with Q. The reason behind this is that no matter if my team decides to do an early invade or protect against one, I have a useful ability ready. After your ultimate, you'll want to max your Q first. The more points you put in it, the longer the snare. After that, you max your E for bigger spell shields, and lastly your W because you aren't going to be doing enough damage early on for it to matter. So to sum up, you always max R first, then Q followed by E, and lastly W. For summoner spells, I tend to go with Flash and Exhaust. It's very common for supports in Season 6, but you can go for Ignite instead of Exhaust. I can't tell you how many times Exhaust has saved me or my ADC in a teamfight. And by picking Ignite, you'd have to be a lot more aggressive. Let's talk about your role in the game. During the lane phase, you want to poke the enemies as much as possible with your Tormented Soil to ramp up the gold income as much as possible. Always be ready to hit the enemy with a Dark Binding and follow up with Tormented Soil. It's free damage, and if your ADC is awake, he should be able to follow up with even more damage. Don't be afraid to get up in the front line during the laning phase. A strong lane presence will force them to lose CS and gives your ADC an easier time farming. Morgana is all about hitting those Qs, and if you don't do this in the laning phase, you could end up losing the fight in bot lane. Don't be afraid to pull off an early gank in the mid lane or jungle, just don't do it unless you're fairly sure that you'll get something out of it. It doesn't have to be a kill, getting summoner spells is fine. Mid game, you'll want to try and catch the enemy team off guard. Getting hit by bindings from bushes or over walls is never fun. You hitting bindings will most likely be the initiation for a teamfight. Other than that, help your team shove lanes and get them kills. In teamfights, you'll be in the middle of the fight. You want to hit as many enemies as possible with your ultimate. Try and peel for your ADC and keep your black shield ready for any crowd control you might see. Don't be afraid to start a fight as long as you know your team is there to back it up. So to sum up, Morgana has great crowd control in game. With 45% cooldown reduction, her Dark Binding goes down to 6 seconds. Her poke is decent and she can use it from a long range. The problem is that unless you hit the binding, the enemy can just move out of it. Her black shield prevents a lot of crowd control on an ally, which means less things to worry about for your team. Tormented Soil deals extra damage to players the less health they have, and it's great at netting you the gold from your support item. Her ultimate can hit the entire enemy team, which can easily turn a fight around in your favor. However, Morgana is a squishy target that has to get very close to her enemies to use her ultimate. The travel time on Dark Binding makes it somewhat easy to dodge, and it's so important that you hit with it. Her cooldowns are kinda high at lower levels, meaning a lot of downtime for when you're useful. The enemy can escape her ultimate by simply walking in different directions, and you'll have to decide who to follow. And now it's time for the rating. That score that says, is she gonna be my main biatch? Her overall score is rated at 3 out of 5. She's a great support, but when you look on a scale from best support to worst, she'd probably hover somewhere around the middle. So this concludes this episode of Best Supports. Thanks for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. Feel free to leave a like if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you want to get notified on future releases. Until next time, guys, this is TBsupport signing out. Don't be salty!